So, hello there, and welcome back to another Night of the Movies podcast. I'm Spy Knight, and in these podcasts, I like talking all things music and TV, and whatever I want, whenever I want. And in today's podcast, I'm reviewing Paddington in Peru. So, let's get into it, shall we? Paddington in Peru is the third film in the Paddington franchise, and it is the first film in the Paddington franchise to not be directed by Paul King. Paul King, who previously directed the last two Paddington movies, did not return to direct the threequel because he was off directing Wonka instead, which came out about a year ago now, which I enjoyed. I didn't love as much as I wanted to. I didn't love it at all, actually, but I liked it. I thought it was a good film, and Paul King was off directing that instead of the third Paddington film. So instead, this Paddington film is directed by Dougal Wilson, who I did a bit of research on before recording this review today, and according to IMDb, Dougal Wilson, who is director of this film, has not directed a full-length feature film before directing this movie, which I didn't know before seeing the film yesterday at the cinema, but makes total sense now after I've looked it up. But even though Paul King did not return to direct this film, he is still attached as an executive producer, and most of the cast from the first two films are back, and we have some newcomers as well, as expected, because it's a new film in the franchise. You always get newcomers when there's a new film in the franchise, and in this film you have Olivia Colman, Academy Award winner Olivia Colman, as a suspicious nun, and you get Antonio Banderas as this handsome boatman in Peru who may have ulterior motives. And yes, you have, as I've already said, most of the cast returning from the first two Paddington films, but Emily Mortimer replaces Sally Hawkins as the mother, what's she called? I put it down here, as the mother, Mary Brown, in the Brown family. Sally Hawkins apparently didn't want to return for the third Paddington film after she had done The Shape of Water, which makes sense if you've seen The Shape of Water, which I have now. I watched it a couple of months ago now. I really liked it. Didn't love it, but I really liked it, and she was fantastic in it. She didn't want to return to the Paddington franchise after doing that film, according to Google. So, she is replaced by Emily Mortimer in this film. Emily Mortimer replaces Sally Hawkins as the mother, Mary Brown, in the Brown family. And you, of course, have Ben Whishaw coming back to voice Paddington in this film too. And I was very, very excited about watching this film because I really, really enjoyed the last two Paddington films, particularly Paddington 2. But Paddington 2 was one of the most joyful film watching experiences I have ever had. That being said, I didn't get to watch those two films in the cinema, which I really wanted to, and so I was really excited about this being the first Paddington movie that I got to see in the cinema. And even though Paul King, whose DNA was all over those first two Paddington movies, his directing, his style is all over the first two Paddington films, even though he didn't return for this film, I was still really excited about it because I wanted to see the continuation of this story, and I enjoyed the first two Paddington films so much. And with most of the cast returning, with great newcomers like Olivia Colman, Antonio Banderas, Emily Mortimer, these are well accomplished actors, I thought this was just going to be so much fun watching it in the cinema. And that was exactly what I went to go and see at the cinema yesterday. Yep, I was excited about it, even when the trailers weren't totally working with me, because the trailers, I don't know why, they just weren't clicking with me when I saw them in the cinema over the past couple of months. But I was still very, very excited about seeing it nonetheless. And the Google plot synopsis of this film goes as follows. Paddington and his adopted family, the Browns, decide to visit his Aunt Lucy in Peru, but circumstances lead them towards misadventures in the Amazon rainforest and mountains of Peru. And that's pretty much everything you need to know about Paddington in Peru before seeing it. And honestly, I thought this film was really enjoyable to watch, and I thought it was a good film. I'm not going to say it was a great film, though. And the reason I'm not going to say it's a great film was because I did think it missed that Paul King touch. And I don't think it had the same magic that the previous two Paddington movies had, particularly Paddington 2. This feels more like a Paddington theme park ride. This Paddington film feels more like you're on the Paddington experience. And I liked that about it, but at the same time, that was also part of its problem. The reason I liked the whole Paddington theme park of it, or the whole Paddington theme park ride feel of this film, was because I like a good theme park ride. I am a big, I'm a big lover of good theme parks and a good theme park ride, and this felt like the Paddington experience, and it kept moving. It didn't stop. Those ups and downs, and the film, I think, is about an hour and 40 minutes and just flew by like the best roller coasters do, like the best theme park rides do. But it's also part of its problem, because when you stop and actually think about this film, you realise how far-fetched it is and how it's so silly and makes almost no sense narratively. And sure, the last two Paddington movies, had silly moments in there. Definitely. But you were able to believe in those moments. You were able to... And that was kind of the film's charms. Whilst in this film... the silly and far-fetched stuff is part of the problem. It just didn't have that same charm as the last two films. And the outlandish stuff that you see happen in this film, once the film has ended, because again, it moves at such a pace that you can't really think about it whilst it's on. But when the film was over, I was walking out the cinema thinking, wait, that didn't make any sense. How did that work? How did these characters find these characters at this park? Because the geography of this film is completely all over the map. Like, at one point, there's these characters at one part in Peru, then they somehow find the other characters in this other part of Peru, and it's like, how is this making any sense whatsoever when you really sit down and think about it? And I did miss that charm and that feel, that classic Paddington feel of the first two films when it came to this film. And I think that was also because they changed the setting. The first two Paddington films take place in London, and this Paddington film takes place in Peru. Well, mostly takes place in Peru. I don't understand why that was the case. The first two films were kind of leading in this direction. But at the same time, it did lose some of its personality because of that. Like, London almost feels like a character in the first two Paddington movies, and Peru feels like a character in this film, but not in a great way. Actually, I take that back. I don't think Peru really feels like a character in this film. It just felt like they were taking Paddington to a different location for the sake of changing up the location for the third film in the franchise. But when a fourth Paddington movie happens, and I'm pretty sure a fourth Paddington movie has already been confirmed. I think there's some reports out there that said a fourth Paddington movie is already in the works. So when it does happen, I hope they stick in London, particularly with the end of the film, because the end of this film sets up a very interesting fourth movie in this franchise, and I hope that fourth movie takes place in London, because that could be, that could bring some of that charm back that I felt was missing. And I did feel that Dougal Wilson, who was the director on this third Paddington film, was trying to emulate and was trying to bring back those same feels that Paul King had in the first two Paddington movies, but wasn't succeeding as well. It felt at times like he was trying to replicate his style, and he wasn't doing the best job, and I didn't feel this was the best made film. Like, the first two Paddington films, I think, were actually really well directed, whilst this film, the direction, something felt off with it. And when I found out, after I saw the film, when I did a bit of research and found out that Dougal Wilson, who directed this film, hasn't directed any full-length feature films before doing this movie, it kind of made sense, because there's a couple of moments where kids are looking at Paddington in the film, because Paddington's CGI in these Paddington movies, it looks great, by the way. That's part of the charm of these films, the way Paddington looks. The films make it believable, but because Paddington is CGI, there are a couple of moments in these films where characters aren't looking directly at him, or just their viewpoint's a little bit off, and that bothered me. That bothered my sort of film critic side. Not that I am a film critic, I just review films on this channel, but that just bothered me personally, because I was like, yeah, this this scene doesn't quite work as well because I don't actually believe the characters are looking straight at Paddington. You know what I mean? And so yeah, I have problems with this film, and it is easily, and I mean easily, the worst film in the Paddington franchise so far. That being said, I still had a lot of fun watching this film. I don't want to take anything away from the amount of enjoyment I had watching this film. Like, straight from the get-go, I had a smile on my face, and that smile didn't go away until the end of the film, until the mid-credit scene of the film. There's a fantastic mid-credit scene that I really loved, and it did. I was about to say something, but actually it's a bit of a spoiler that's going to give something away. But yeah, I had a huge smile on my face throughout so much of this film. And I did still feel that joy from the first two Paddington movies in here. Not quite as much as I would have liked to. And I do feel like, again, that Paul King touch, which was so vital to the first two films, is largely lost here. But there is still this joy with the film. There's still this joy in this Paddington film, is what I'm trying to say. And the characters are still delightful to watch. I still enjoyed watching the Brown family in this film. However, I will say I much preferred Sally Hawkins as Mary Brown, the mother in the Brown family. Emily Mortimer isn't bad. Not bad at all. But I think the thing is, Sally Hawkins fit that role so perfectly, in my opinion. And I felt she was missing from this film. I felt she was a vital ingredient of the first two Paddington movies. She was part of that charm of the first two Paddington films. But in this film, she's not here because she didn't want to come back. And the recast of Emily Mortimer isn't bad. I don't think she's bad in the film, but I was sat there in a couple of moments thinking, yeah, you're not Sally Hawkins. And maybe if they continue to make, I don't know, Paddington films and they get up to like Paddington 6, Adventures in London, that's a terrible title for the film, but you know what I'm getting at. If they make like, I don't know, 3 more Paddington films and Emily Mortimer continues to play this character, maybe I'll feel more affection to her as the films go on, because I've had Sally Hawkins as the mother in the Brown family for 2 films, for 2 brilliant Paddington films, and I've only had Emily Mortimer as the mother in the Brown family for 1 good Paddington film. And if the Paddington films go back to London and they're better than this film, and Emily Mortimer, settles into the role more, maybe I'll feel differently come Paddington 6, if they make 6 Paddington films. I'm just, again, this is all just hypothetical, but at the same time, you get the point I'm making. Maybe I'll feel differently once I've seen Emily Mortimer play the role in multiple films, because I have seen Sally Hawkins play the role of the mother in the Brown family in 2 films, in 2 Paddington films at that. But I was sat there and I was missing Sally Hawkins in this film. Again, Emily Mortimer isn't bad, but I think Sally Hawkins plays that role better. But saying that, Newcomers, Olivia Colman and Antonio Banderas are absolutely wonderful to watch. Olivia Colman plays this suspicious nun, and she has this line in the film that I burst out laughing in the cinemas, like, the Lord moves in suspicious ways. And then Julie Walters' character says, I'm pretty sure it's mysterious ways. And then Olivia Colman's like, hi, you know your scripture. And she's so funny in the film. And I love seeing Olivia Colman in these sort of roles because she's going back to her comedic roots, where she was in like Peep Show and when she was in the Cambridge Footlights, I think that's what it was called. I must admit, I'm not too clued in on all of that. But she's going back to her comedic roots. She did that in Wonka as well. And I think a lot of the same crew worked on Wonka and worked on this film, so that kind of made sense. So yeah, I found her absolutely hilarious in this movie, and I loved watching her. And Antonio Banderas, Zorro himself, Puss in Boots himself. I love that he voiced Puss in Boots, by the way, and I can't wait to hear him voice Puss in Boots in Shrek 5, which I think is coming out in 2026. I wish that was coming out next year. I can't wait for it. I don't know why, but I'm really excited for the next Shrek film. Anyway, a bit of a tangent there about Shrek. Go back to what I was saying. Antonio Banderas has knocked over one of my pops there. Antonio Banderas is, you can tell, just having the time of his life playing this character. I don't know if he was. Maybe he had a terrible time on set. But he seems to be having such a good time. And I had such a good time watching him. And I'm not going to say much, but he plays more than one character in this film. And I loved how they did that. I loved how he played more than one character, because it shouldn't have worked that, but it did wonderfully, and Olivia Colman and Antonio Banderas seem to be having such a wonderful time playing their characters in this film, and I had such a wonderful time watching them as well. And the film is just wonderful, you know, it got me a bit emotional towards the end, and the very end of the film in particular, just before the credits started rolling, not the mid-credit scene, but the final scene in the film, I literally had the biggest grin on my face, and I was like, if this was what Paddington 4 is going to be, I'm all in for it. And I liked the story. I got into the story of the film. It's got a nice little mystery in there, which I found compelling enough, and it's a sweet story. You know, if you're invested in the previous two Paddington movies, if you enjoyed those films, I think you'll get something out of this film. If those previous two Paddington movies weren't for you, don't go into this film expecting anything different, because I don't think you're going to get that. I don't think this is going to change your mind in the Paddington series, and as I've already said, I do think this is easily the worst film in the Paddington franchise so far, but it's still a fun watch, and that's what I wanted from this film. I wasn't going into expecting a masterpiece, you know? I was going into this expecting to have a delightful time, find some harmless fun in there, laugh out loud, get invested in a sweet story, and have a wonderful time. And that's what I got. Again, it's not as good as the first two films, and it does miss some of that charm the first two films as well. And I did miss Paul King directing, but I do think it works. It's enjoyable to watch. It moves at a brisk pace, and it feels like a Paddington theme park ride. For better and for worse, but, you know, that worked for me as well. And so, all in all, I'm going to say that Paddington in Peru, I'm going to say that it's a... I think I'm going to give it a 7.3 out of 10. I'm giving it a rating because I can't quite give it a 7.5 out of 10, because I give films a 7.5 out of 10 if I think they're solid. And I wouldn't say this is a solid film. You can pick out a lot of plot holes with it. And I'm not going to give it a 7 out of 10 because I give films a 7 out of 10 if I found them to be good. But I found this film to just be a little bit better than good. I don't know, maybe. I think it's just because I enjoyed it more than Piece by Piece, which I gave a 7 out of 10 earlier this week. You know, and I liked Piece by Piece. But I was watching this film thinking, this is a better family film than Piece by Piece. Not they're very similar films, but they're both family films. They're not kids' films. I hate when people say the phrase kids' films. Like, family films. That's what a good kid film is. It's a family film. A film that the family can sit down and watch, and each member of the family will get something out of it. And I'm not saying this is a brilliant family film like, say, Paddington 2 is, but it's a good family film. I can see a family sitting down and each member of the family, you know, getting something out of it. Even the older members of the family, like myself, getting something out of it and having a good time. Again, there were problems with it for sure, but it's enjoyable and it makes you smile. And you know what? That was enough for me, even with all the problems it had. And so, all in all, as I already said, and as I'm going to say once more in this podcast today, Paddington in Peru is a 7.3 out of 10 from me. Hey, that rhymed. Anyway, guys, that's it for today's podcast. If you have seen Paddington in Peru, please let me know your thoughts on it in the comment section below. And as always, thank you for watching or listening to this podcast. And if you haven't yet, please do click down below and like and subscribe on this video. And look forward to many more videos and many more podcasts coming very, very soon on this channel. As I've already said, thank you as always for watching or listening to this podcast, and I suppose this is it, so I will see you guys again soon, but bye for now, bye.